Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Hi.
Hello. Hello,
How are
hello.
you?
Welcome, welcome. We're in my garage today. Lots of fun. Hope you're having a good Wednesday. I'm having a great Wednesday. The sun is shining. I ran 9.5 kilometers at lunch with Mr. Kamali, Mr. Nobody. So Mr. Nobody and I went for a run at lunchtime. It was awesome. Oh no, bad Wednesday. How come, Danielle? Do you have a test today? What's going on? Every class had tests. Guess what? There's a test today. I'm just kidding. I won't give you a test. Like, bruh. Oh, well, hopefully you were prepared and you did well. I would cry. Yume's got your back. She will cry for you. That's some good girl solidarity right there. If you want to cry, I'll cry with you. You know? Men don't say things like that. I did. Oh, you cried? I'm sorry, Danielle. Jeez, you should have asked for prayers. I would have prayed for you. I'm praying for you anyways. I do pray for you. It's okay. It's gonna be all right. I promise. Okay, just gonna close that up. I did okay. No, I didn't cry. Almost did that. Oh, you did okay. You didn't cry. Okay, good. Praise God. All right. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. We're going to start on our Gusset today. So I've got 2, 4, 5 people. Not a lot of people, but hey, let's begin anyways. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we pray for Danielle's peace. We pray for all of our peace, that people who wrote tests today and need a little bit of encouragement, we thank you for this opportunity to challenge ourselves, to make up for our mistakes and move on. And for we know, Lord, that you continually bring us back. You are so patient with us. Thank you for your patience. And we ask all this in your holy name. Amen. Bishop McNally, come Holy Spirit. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lol. Amen. Okay. So we got a box of tricks from the shop. I got some of my own tools here. Let's see what we got here. So first of all, what we're gonna need is new biking gloves for my daughter. She's always bailing on her bike, so I got her some gloves. No, we're not gonna need that today. We're gonna need some wood. We need some wood, so 4x4. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. She's got a little Frozen 2 bike. Maybe she'll come out and show you guys some tricks. 4x4 for the angle for our gusset. So we're making this piece. Remember our model piece gusset out of this stuff. So we're going to trace this on and give it a cut with a coping saw. So that's part 2. Part 1, we're going to need a blank. So your wood blanks here. This one says Chantel. Maybe I'll try to find one without a name on it. I got Yume's. I don't see a name on this one, so maybe I'll use this one. Sweet. Okay. So this piece is our normal 1x4 width and thickness and length. So all those dimensions we've been talking about in our safety quizzes. It has to be a foot long to go on the table saw planer and all that stuff. This is length. Our width, okay, we're talking about when we're maybe going through the jointer, right? We're going to go along the edge and we're going to adjust the width. As far as thickness goes, remember 10 millimeters minimum thickness on our planer unless we use a backing board, stuff like that. So getting to know the dimensions, I'm going to keep using those terms as we measure today. So we got some wood, good. Next step we're going to need is some layout tools. So we're going to need a tape measure and a pencil. Okay, so tape measure, pencil, and we're going to need a square for getting all of our measurements nice and straight, nice and square. Okay, here we go. That's all we're going to need to start. So let's begin with that. So according to our dimensions, our piece is going to be 5 inches long. Okay, so we're going to cut this to 5. So I cut them to 6, gave you guys a little bit of extra. So we're going to measure and lay out all of our marks for cutting and drilling and things like that first. So that's what we're going to do first of all. So let's do that. Oops, dropped you. Dropped you like a rock. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is measure. So I can use this tri-square. It's kind of nice. It's got it's got inches on it. So I can take this tri-square. I can start my 0 right here where my beam meets my blade. So a couple of important terms. On a tri-square, this is a tri-square, our beam always goes against the edge and our blade is what we draw on. So beam and blade of a tri-square, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mark my 5 inches right here. I'm gonna make a little mark there. So just a tiny little mark, you can barely see. It's pointing to the 5-inch mark. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna place my beam against my edge and I'm gonna scribe across my blade at that 5-inch mark. So I'm gonna get it close and I'm gonna place my pencil on and make sure my pencil lands right on my mark. So if I need to move it up or down a little bit, I can do that. So it takes a little bit of practice to get this one-handed, but if you can hold this with your thumb, slide this up and down as needed, and scribe across at 5 inches. That's my 5-inch mark. Oh, Danielle's got her camera on. That's nice. Okay. We've got a 5-inch mark, and we have a waist mark. So I'm going to cut this off. Now, the reason I put a waist mark, now why would I put a waist mark on here? Oh boy. A waist mark is here. It tells me which side of the line to cut on. So if I take my saw, you got a great big pole saw here. It's a Japanese pole saw. So this is different from your normal saw where you would push forward with a normal saw. This saw you're going to pull with. If I put my blade on this side of the line, my piece will be too short. If I cut right on the line, my piece is still going to be too short. If I cut just on the waist side of my line, then my piece is going to be just the right length with a little bit extra for sanding. So that's why I put a waist mark, okay? Now for you, what I want you to do when you come back in the shop when we start this, to help us cut nice and straight, we're actually going to square all the way around this. So I'm going to square the front. I'm going to square the 2 edges. So I got my surface squared. I'm going to find my mark on the side. So see the pencil mark? I'm just going to find it with my pencil and I'm going to scribe across, okay? I'm going to flip it over, put my beam on my edge and scribe across my surface again. So I'm going to find that mark with my pencil, make sure I'm right on before I start drawing, and I'm going to scribe across. I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do my last edge. So my beam on my surface, scribing across my edge, and I'm going to scribe across. Now, if all my lines line up perfectly, then I know 2 things. My piece is square. I didn't screw up my measuring or my squaring, and my tool is square. So one of those things is wrong if these 4 lines don't line up for you. Either your piece isn't square, your square isn't square, or human error. You messed up somehow when you were measuring it, or squaring it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mark waist marks on all 4 sides. Good practice to get into when you're starting with hand tools is to square all 4 sides and put waist mark on all 4 sides. So no matter which side you cut, you know which side is the waist side. And also, so it'll guide you as you cut. You can see, am I cutting straight or not? Because as soon as I start to cut down, if my saw tilts a little bit one way or the other, I'm going to get a crooked cut. And so this line's going to guide me as I cut. So we're going to use a number of tools here. I can use my Japanese pole saw. It's a nice saw, so it comes in a rip saw. It comes in a cross cut as well. So some of them have 2 edges, one for ripping, one for cross cutting. So a rip cut, again, to review from our table saw safety, a rip cut is going to be with the grain. a crosscut is going to be across the grain. So hopefully that's starting to sink in. We're starting to come up with the terminology and determine the difference between these cuts. My anxiety would mess up and cut it slanted. Danielle, don't worry about it. Woodworking in grade 10 is simple because you're just starting out. We're using cheap wood. Don't stress. Lots of people mess up this first cut. The very first thing I make every single grade 10 student do is this, 4 waste marks, 4 marks, and then try to cut a straight line. And nobody cuts a straight line. It's very rare unless students have experience. So don't stress. That's what the file is for. So let's cut. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up over here with in my vise. So I'm going to hold my piece in place as I'm cutting so that I don't, so it doesn't move around on me. So move my workbench. I got a nice little vise here. Beautiful. I'm going to put it in and we're going to cut. Now, a couple ways to do this. Cutting straight down is always the best. I got some things in the way here, so I'm going to slide this guy back a little bit. My workbench is in progress. They haven't really finalized the design yet, but you guys can get an idea about what's going on here pretty easily. Okay, so I'm going to line this up on the edge of my vise so that I can cut nice and straight. And I'm going to watch a few things as I cut. So I'm going to do, now because this one cuts on the backstroke, I'm going to start my cut on my line by pushing. And these blades actually have a fun little straight edge with no teeth on the front. That's to help to line up your cut. So you can put that right on your line or right beside your line, and you can start to scribe your cut. Now, what you want to try to do is leave the pencil mark. If you leave the pencil mark, then you have something to file to. If you have no pencil mark, it usually means your piece is too short. So you want to try to leave the pencil mark. And as I go, I'm going to try to keep my saw straight so that I can follow this line really nicely. Okay. Next step, cutting. So a couple of options here. I have a normal saw. This saw is going to cut on the forward stroke. That's for the most part you're going to be using a saw like this. So this saw is it cuts on the forward stroke, but it's really aggressive. You can see the tooth set on it, the raking of the teeth, and the length of the teeth. Really quite aggressive. So we're not going to use this saw today, but it's totally an option, especially in carpentry when you're just doing rough type cuts. And the nice thing is it's actually got some finer teeth on the back here to get your cut started, or for doing, tricky cuts if you're in a small space and you're trying to cut upwards. Sometimes it's tough to get the whole length. We can use this side. This can be used for a number of things just because the teeth are a little bit finer. That's why I like the saw. I bought it really cheap at Home Depot. This saw, really expensive. So that's what we're going to use today. So like I said, I'm going to get my cut started, and I'm going to cut on the backstroke. And what I can use is my knuckle to guide my cut. I don't like using my finger in case this skips over and cuts my finger. If I use my knuckle, no fear, no worries, Daniela, don't be scared. Use your knuckle, just like those of you who are in culinary. You know that you should use your knuckle when you're guiding your knife when you're cutting veggies, right? You always use your knuckle, the claw grip. You never use your fingers down. You always use the claw grip. That way you keep the blade away from your fingers. So I'm going to start this at a bit of an angle. I'm not going to cut the whole length. And I'm going to watch as I go. I'm going to watch this front line. I'm going to blow the dust away. I'm going to watch my back line. And I'm going to try to keep my pencil so that I have something to file to. So I'm going to use the whole length of the saw. Move my computer back just a scotch. And we're going to cut nice and straight. So what I'm doing is I'm watching the front and I'm watching the back, because this saw can also turn like this. So I'm watching my front line and my back line as I cut. to make sure I stay nice and straight. Okay, now I'm getting to the end of my cut, so I'm going to slow down a little. If I break through, I'm going to splinter it. I'll get breakout, what we call breakout, on the bottom of my cut. So I'm going to slow down at the end of my cut and just let the teeth do the work. I'm barely putting any down pressure on the saw. Just letting the tool do the work. Barely pushing. And you can hear, too, the sound difference in that as you get to the end. Okay, so I'm through. Got a nice smooth cut. And if we inspect this, I got pencil on this side, pencil. So you see I've left the pencil. This one, tiny bit of pencil even, I can see. So I've got pencil all the way around, which is a good thing. It means my piece is not too short. So we can double check after we cut. There I've got a nice 5-inch piece, beautiful. And that way we've started on our gusset. So the next step, we need to do a little more measuring. What we're going to do is we're going to put the curve on the end. You notice our demo piece, or you've got one of those that's made before. It's got a nice round edge on it. It's not really necessary, but it looks cool, and it's a little bit it's a little more safe, less sharp edges on my project in general. So I have the one my one that I've gone off of, and if I look at these measurements, and you guys will know from your paper drawings that my curve is 3/4 from the end, and it's 1 inch in. So it's 3/4 by 1 inch. So 3/4 on the top starts my curve, and 1 inch from the end starts my curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make those marks on my piece, just like you guys did on your paper, and I'm going to use this cut side. And I'll tell you why, because this side is nice and cut smooth from our miter saw. This side I just cut. It's not that pretty, it's not perfectly square. So I'm going to put my curves here, and then I can just sort of round the whole thing over, and straight doesn't really matter. So I'm kind of cutting a little curve there. But if you can see the end grain on your cut, you have a nice smooth saw. It doesn't take a lot of filing. You use a rough saw like this, it's going to look all butchered and beat up, and it's going to take a lot of filing to make it smooth. The more filing you have to do, the less likely it is to be square. Okay, so we're going to carry on here. Let's make some measurements. So 3/4 in from my end. Sorry, 3/4 from here to here. So I'm going to start at 8. I'm going to go to 7 1/4. I'm going to make a little mark just so I can find it. Now I've got this one. This end I've also got, I'm starting at 8, so I'm going to go to 7 1/4 for a total of 3/4. So I've got to mark a 3/4 from this corner and a mark a 3/4 from this corner. I'm now going to turn my square. You see how squares are kind of handy? They make the job nice and easy because it holds it tight for me. Tape measures are tricky, and they're kind of wiggly. They have this hook end on the end for inside and outside measurements. Kind of tricky that way. So what we're going to do is use a square. Keeps us nice and precise. So a ruler or a square, we got a little more precision, a little more accuracy. So I'm going to make a 1 inch mark. So I started at 8. I'm going to go to 7, a 1 inch mark here. And same here. I'm going to make a little 1 inch mark on this side. Okay. Now, at this point, what I can do is I can freehand this, or I can use something circular to draw my curve with. I'm going to cheat a little. I have a piece that that has a curve on it. So I'm going to throw it on there. Now it is bigger than my piece, so there's a little bit of a difference here. This is a little bit bigger, so I can't trace it perfectly. In the classroom, we're going to use a saw. Yes, I sure as heck hope so. It's construction. You got to use a saw. Good question. Okay, I'm going to line up my two marks. So I've lined up my mark here, and I'm going to go ahead and scribe that with my pencil. Gotta hold your tongue the right way. Okay, so I've got my first curve, and I'm going to mark my second curve. Okay, so I've got my two curves here, and I'm ready to cut. Now, can I use a straight saw? No way. This thing's got a stiff back on it to keep the cuts nice and straight. Cutting a curve with this is really tricky because this is so straight and it's got such a thick blade on it. So what we're going to do, sorry, a wide blade on it, is we're going to grab a different tool. We're going to grab a coping saw. So this coping saw is for cutting corners. It's got a nice tiny little blade on it, kind of like a bandsaw. And what we can do is we can turn corners as we cut. So this saw is really handy for that. Coping comes from the word like coping around your house, sort of like baseboards. So if you have to cut, profiled baseboards to make them match just so, you can use a coping saw, kind of a lost art. So what we're going to do is use a coping saw for those curves. So let's do that. Now, another little trick to get me started is to make, from these curves, I can make some squared lines here on those curves to help me start and finish my cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little mark there. That's where my cut's going to start. And then I'm going to make a mark on the top, and that's where my cut's going to end. Getting used to holding the tri-square with one hand is really tricky. A lot of students struggle with it. But it just takes practice, it takes time. Guess what? I didn't know how to use a tri-square perfectly the first time I used one either, so don't be too hard on yourselves. And flipping it over, see, so having the beam on this end, I want to make a mark right here on the end of my piece, but there's nothing for my beam to sit on. It's wiggling a lot. So what I'm going to do is flip it over. I'm going to flip my beam over, and I'm going to, now I've got a lot of room to rest my beam on my wood piece, and I'm going to scribe up to my 3/4 inch mark. So now what I've got from my layout is a couple of marks that are going to guide my cut. I don't need one on the bottom because I can't really see it. I'm just going to try to hold my, my saw nice and straight. If I want, I can make some X marks. I'm going to put waist marks on here to show me I need to cut on that side of the line. I need to get rid of all that wood. And you'll see pros do this. Guys that have been in furniture forever, they'll have arrows, they'll have X's. Guys and gals, sorry, I'm very sexist. Guys and gals that have been making furniture a long time, you'll see marks all over their pieces to help them remember, hey, because guess what? Once you start cutting into that wood, there's no turning back. You have to glue up an ugly mark. People are going to see that, right? So here we go. Let's start cutting with a coping saw. So this one is another thing where students really struggle at first, but once they get onto it, they go quite well. And so what we're going to do is, let's see, which way should I cut? I like cutting this way for this cut. I'm going to give myself lots of room on the end, and we're going to cut there. Now, so yeah, what students really struggle with this cut, but it's a small cut. It's easy to get started, and then they have to cut this whole thing with the coping saw. So a little bit of practice here and here, and then they go to this and they take right off and they cut this whole curve with the coping saw. No problem. Guys, it's pretty gender neutral. Sure, yeah, I like the sounds of that. Thank you. You guys are so forgiving of me. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do to start my cut is I'm not going to start like this and go along my curve because the saw will slip. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cut into my wood a couple times on the waist side of my pencil just to get my saw started, and then as soon as I have a cut started, I'm going to turn and I'm going to follow this. Now, the reason that I'm down here, not way up here standing up, is keeping this saw straight really tricky. If I cut like this, it might look good on the top, but it's not going to look good on the bottom, and likewise this way. So I need to keep my saw straight up and down like a sewing machine. If you've ever seen a sewing machine run straight up and down, you're going to get a really nice stitch. Now the same goes for this. So started our cut. My vise is a little bit in the way, so I'm going to go a little more off the end. again, I'm just going to follow my pencil mark. And I'm going to try to keep this sucker straight up and down. If you're slanted a little bit ahead, that's okay, but what you want to try to do is keep that saw. Lost my cut. Start over. Here we go. Cut into the wood a little bit, and then slowly turn that saw, just like a bandsaw. You don't want to be too quick with your turns. So I'm going to keep this thing straight up and down, and I'm going to follow my curve, just like so. Trying to use the whole saw. So I mentioned that with using the back saw as well. If I only use the middle of the saw, I'm going to get a pretty wore out part in the middle of my saw. And these don't even get used. And then every time I go to cut afterwards, it's going to get stuck on those dull teeth. And it'll shake all the time, your camera. So what you want to do is use the whole saw. You wear the saw evenly. You're less likely to break teeth, and it's quicker. You use less energy because you're using the tool instead of your muscles. So that's what you want to do. Just use the entire saw straight up and down as you can, blowing away the dust and following my pencil line. Now, this isn't an exact science. This curve is going to be hidden away underneath the armrest of the chair. So just be aware of that. Say, hey, you know what? This whole hand tools project is going to be the one thing on the chair you can barely see. So that's why we make it with hand tools, so you can get the practice you need. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mr. Lawrence, why do we use hand tools at all? Well, an old wise shop teacher once told me, power tools make the same mistakes hand tools do, only 1,000 times faster. So what you want to do is become really proficient on hand tools, and then when you go to use the power tools, you'll be an expert. You'll know what you're doing. You'll know what a straight line looks like. You'll know which side of the line to line up on. You'll know how to do your layout. You'll have respect for the tool. Maybe you cut yourself a couple times with a handsaw and you're going, wow, I know how to avoid that on a power tool now before I cut my whole arm off. I'm just kidding. You guys aren't going to cut your arms off. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Now, it's not pretty at all, but that's okay. It's a curved cut, and what we're going to do is we're going to follow up with our file. So not an issue. I'm not worried about it not being pretty. Ooh. But I am getting a little stiff after running 10 kilometers today. Not going to lie. Not going to lie, ladies. I'm kind of stiff. Okay. Oh, now, because I flipped this over, and I want to leave my camera where it is, excuse me, what I'm going to do is keep my, what's going on, Daniela? Is this some kind of camera challenge I don't know about? Is I traced it on the other side so I didn't have to turn my piece around and move the camera. Okay. So I get that guy started. It's always tough to start. You can tell the saw's kind of biting. Before you get a nice cut, we got to get it started. Oh, you're looking at your marks. Good. 63, you passed. That's not a fail. I thought fail was like under 50. Did they change the rules or what? Is it marked out of 120 or what? Yeah, that's a pass. That's a pass, yes. Is your mom gonna yell at you or what? Is she always checking your D2L? I gotta pay attention. I'm gonna cut my arm off. That's a pass. Not to me. Oh, Daniela's got high standards. That's okay. High standards are okay as long as you don't obsess about them, right? At the end of the day, it's a number. And you say, okay, focus on what I can work on. Don't focus on, I failed at this, I was wrong. I'm going to say, you know what did I miss? What do I need to learn for next time? Right? Friday, and we have to turn on our cameras. So they have to watch you do the test so you're not cheating? Is that why? Which class is this? I don't study. I get like 80s, but I procrastinate. I'm so disappointed. Well, you know what you did wrong. That's great. That's actually encouraging because you can say, that's a nice confession right there. I didn't study. I disappointed myself. I procrastinated. Hey, that's great. So what you've done is you've repented. This is Christian theory here. You've repented of your ways. You've shown what you've done wrong, and now you're going to do it better. With your grace, Lord. Did you know that knowledge is a gift of the Holy Spirit? Sports med. Oh, yeah. You got this. I'm going to need sports med if I cut my arm off. Okay. So I'm blowing away the dust. This one's way better. I did much better on this one than I did on the last one. So same thing. The end of my cut, I'm going really slow. I don't want to bust out my piece. I don't want it to fly off. I don't want to break it off. The temptation at this point for a lot of students is just to bust it off. And what happens is sometimes it's like a wishbone. Which side are you going to get, the big chunk side or the broke off side? Well, oftentimes this is the big chunk side and this is the broke off side. And now you have a big piece missing out of your workpiece. Students show me, they're like, hey, mister, something happened. I need a new piece. And I'm like, what'd you do? And basically they got to this point and then they just broke it off. It's like a scab there. Like they just had to pick it off. And I'm like, no, finish the cut. You worked so hard. Go nice and slow at the end. And then watch that thing just fall off. Nice and easy. Bang. Easy, right? Okay. So we got some really ugly, how are your hands not hurting? I was barely pushing, guys. You got to learn to use the tool. That's all. The tool, let the tool do the work. Work hard, smarter, not harder. Not harder, not smarter. Okay. Now, if I clamp too hard, this is pretty soft wood, I'm going to make a mark. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a little filing. So you can see I left my pencil. This one was the bottom side. I lost my pencil. Wasn't a perfect cut. Pencil's on the other side. Never mind. So I got pencil on both sides of this one. So I've left my pencil here. I've left my pencil here. This side wasn't marked, but this side was. I've left my pencil here. Got into it a little bit here. Little oopsie right there. So we're going to fix that up with a file. No issues. We have two types of files today. So I hope you guys are paying attention because the next step is going to be tool ID. You're going to need to know the names of all the tools. Don't worry, I have a video for this, and I even have a little practice fun game video you guys can play if you want to get to know the names of the tools before we do the D2L tool ID. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so I've got a couple of files, so we're going to learn about files now. Kaboom? Kahoot, you mean? Kaboom? No, it's called Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle turns a YouTube video into a quiz where you watch the video and then it pauses and then there's a question. So what I do in the video is I hold up a tool and then the video pauses and then the question goes, what tool is this? And then you guess if you've ever done an Edpuzzle. So I've got an Edpuzzle on D2L that you guys can do for your tool ID before you do the quiz. So you're all going to be masters, but hopefully you're paying attention. So far, quick recap on our tools. Easy, tape measure, right? We got a pencil. We got a square. This is called a tri-square. There's 5 different kinds of squares in the video you're going to need to know. This is just one tri-square. Okay? We've got that one, yeah. We've got a pull saw. This is not on the quiz, so don't worry about it. We've got in the quiz it's a back saw because it's got a stiff back on it. This one doesn't have it. It's just a rip saw, but we've got a crosscut saw. Sorry, we've got a back saw in the video. So we got saws. We got a coping saw. So C-O-P-I-N-G, coping saw to work with. So lots of tools. Okay, two kinds of files now. I lied, 3 kinds of files. So we've got a bastard file. A bastard file is a flat file, and this is a double cut. Okay, so a double cut rough file. So we've got a nice tough surface here. It's got 2 cuts in it. So if you look close, these diamonds are formed by cuts going this way and cuts going this way. about 30 degrees or so. And that creates a nice rough surface for filing quickly. Now we've also got a smoother file. This one is not so rough, and this is also a flat file. It's a bastard file, but it's a smooth file, and it's single cut. So if you look close, this only has one cut on it, just lines going this way, and they're not as deep. So this is for finer work, finishing work. It's going to touch up your piece really nicely. And for a curve, so what the heck would I use a half round file for? A half round file? Well, if I need to get into places like this, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a file in here, and we're going to smooth out the inside of our curve using a half round file. A half round file, okay? Looks like what my mom uses to file her nails. So beautiful. Yeah, sanding is tedious, but the results are the best part. At the end of the day, when you're done sanding and your project looks awesome, very satisfying. So what we're going to do is we're going to start filing. Now you want to let the file do the work. Now, if I file in one position or another, I'm going to end up with a flat spot. So I have to continuously curve or move my file from vertical to horizontal. So my start point, my finish point, and I have to continuously move this. Are we going to paint after? I'd love to paint. There was one group that painted their chair because they were done so early, and I have pictures of it. It's awesome. It's waterproof paint, so now it's like an outdoor chair. It's the same paint I used on my Kitchissippi chair in front of my house, and it looks fantastic, if I do say so myself. Plus, it's aging very well because it's waterproof. Okay, now I've noticed I'm not quite at my line, so I'm going to get a little more depth started here. Get right to my 1-inch mark and then work my way up. Now this is a nice new file. It's a beautiful thing. It's doing the work quite quickly. But I've still got some saw marks right here. And these are marks that are pretty obvious because they go right across your grain. And so we need to get rid of those. And the trick here is keeping it flat, not tipping. Otherwise, we get a curved cut. Okay, we're almost done. This thing is looking great. My cut marks are almost gone. My saw marks are nearly gone. Okay, almost there. I can see just a little bit left. And my pencil mark, I've gone right to my pencil mark, which is great. I'm going to finish up with a smooth file. This is like to take out the grooves that the big file uses. So that's all sanding is. We call it sanding or finishing. All it does is it makes smaller and smaller cuts or grooves in the wood until they're not visible to the naked eye. That's the whole goal of sanding. Is you're using something rough to get rid of rougher spots. You're using something smooth to get rid of those half rough spots. So, right? So that's all sanding really is. So as long as my marks of my rough file are gone and my saw marks are gone, I'm good to go. I got a nice round curve. Okay, let's flip this over. And we'll do this side. So you guys can see the pencil there. I can't see it, but that's okay. I could lay it out on this side, but I'm lazy. Now, why did I turn the piece around? Remember, a tree is like a bundle of straws. If I start filing this way, in this direction, though that bundle of straws is going to bust out. It's going to break out this way. A lot of students get pieces chipping off the side, really ugly. So that bundle of straws that a tree is grown in, it's like cellulose, that those cells are going to bust out this way, and you're going to get a whole bunch of chips. Whereas if I file in this way, they're all just pushing against each other. There's nowhere for them to go. So it's sort of like petting a dog. If you pet a dog the right way, he's happy. If you pet him the wrong way, not happy, right? So make sure that you kind of follow the grain, or at least avoid breakout at all costs. Okay, so I'm going to start that. This side's way worse. I should have done this side first. My old boss's mantra was do the hardest part first. And I kind of tried to live my life by that. My dad told me that a really long time ago, that his boss would always, he never said it, but he always did the hardest things in life first. When they came to a new job, because my dad works construction, they would have some really ugly parts of the job to do. Really deep holes, mucky, lots of water, lots of rock, maybe some boulders, because we did underground, and they would always do the hardest parts first. So here's a little tip for you, Daniela, with your procrastination. Always do the toughest part first. I thought he said cutting a dog. No, petting a dog. Cutting a dog? Maybe cutting a dog's hair. You want to go with the grain? What are we talking about? Okay. Softwood too is really easy. The exemplar that I did out of maple was really difficult. The end grain on hardwood is really tough. But softwood, really nice and easy to file. I do this maybe 30 times and we're done. We're out of here. Right? Okay, 252. No problem. Okay, we're getting there. Now, I had a couple of oopsies here, some deep cuts that I'm going to have to dig into my 1-inch mark a little bit, unfortunately. Now, we're going to learn another tool in the Tool ID video, and that tool is a file card. A file card cleans the file. You get a bunch of dust worked in here. It's not as effective as cutting, usually more so in metal work, but here we are. A file card is like a brush. It looks like a hairbrush, but they're metal bristles. And you just simply place your file on the table and you brush along in the direction of your cuts to clean out that sawdust. I'm breaking every rule. Your hand oil, the oils your body produces are not good for metal. They'll actually break it down. So try to avoid, I know a lot of guys are really particular about their tools. They'll actually grab a piece of a rag or something and put it on the end so that their body oils don't end up on the file. I'm not that picky. This is just woodworking, but you know, some people are picky that way, especially really sweaty people. I know really sweaty people that they don't like sweating on their tools, so they'll, you know, wear gloves or whatever. I'm not a really sweaty person. Okay, not bad. Not my best work, but here we are. It's a curve. Okay, I'm gonna grab the smooth file. I'm gonna go. Procrastinate to avoid the hard parts. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do the hardest thing first. If I have 5 things to do, my inclination is, just coast, do the easy stuff. But my head is always like, Bill Lawrence said, you know, do the hardest part first. Get it out of the way. And then he'd leave. The boss would be like, okay, the hard work's done. I'm out of here. And he'd let everybody do the boring, easy work. He loved that stuff. You kind of sink your teeth into it, right? Okay, so we get a nice smooth surface. You can still see some not saw marks. These are marks from my rough file. So if you want to touch those up and get rid of those are not very pretty, right? This side a little more smooth, but you can see right here, you can see in the camera some saw marks, some file marks. Now, those aren't too bad, especially on softwood. I can leave this for my sandpaper. What I can do, is use some 80 or 100 grit and get rid of those very easily on softwood. So I'm not going to go crazy with the file. I just want to smooth out my corners. You can see I still left a little bit of pencil. That's okay. Some people leave a couple millimeters for sanding, maybe 1 millimeter for sanding, and when you even leave a couple millimeters. But here we are. What's wrong with being ugly? I don't know. You're going to have to find an ugly person. I've never seen one. I've never met an ugly person before. Okay. So we've got some nice round corners. What we're going to do is our nice dado, and we're going to lay out the holes for our screws. So back to our layout spot. I get to stand up a little bit. My internet connection is unstable. Sorry. I hope you guys are still getting this feed okay. All righty. So we've got our piece. It's supposed to look like this. So our dado is missing. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to do the screw holes last. So in order to put this sucker in the middle, I just noticed you're recording. Yeah, for the people that missed the class. So don't worry, your profile pictures shouldn't show up in the recording. I've never seen a recording with names or pictures. It's just me. So don't worry about it. I think you're safe. You don't care? Well, your profile picture is great. It always gives me a good laugh. Okay, so we're gonna find the middle of this sucker, and we're gonna make our dado for our angled piece, our gusset here. It needs to slide in here really nice. So we need to be really precise about that. So we're gonna measure a 3/4 inch dado. Let's do it. So first step is to find. Oh wow, my table saw blade is sticking up. I'm gonna lower that a little bit so I can stop scratching my laptop. That's not good. And we're gonna find the middle. So let's find the middle of this sucker. Okay, easy way is to take the total width and divide by 2. So I've got here 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3/8. Okay, so I know that 1.5 is going to be half of 3, but then I have 3/8 to deal with. Well, what's half of 1, 2, 3/8? Well, it's 1.5 eighths, right? 1.5 eighths is 3/16. So I'm going to go 1.5 will get me to 3, and then plus 1, 2, 3/16 is going to get me to halfway mark. So I'm going to go 1 inch, half inch, and then my middle is going to be 1, 2, 3/16 past that point. So that's my dead center. That's the center of my piece. I got a little mark. I don't really need that. What I need is 3/4 for my dado. So 3/8 this side and 3/8 this side of my center mark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 3/8 this way. So 1, 2, 3/8 that way and make a mark. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3/8 that way and make a mark. Okay, so I've got my marks there. I've got my center mark, and I've got 3/8 this way. I got 3/8 that way. 3/4 total. Okay, here we go. No, we're doing okay here. All right. Okay, so we're going to square this down 4 inches. So the total length, as you know from your plans, is 4-inch dado. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, and I'm going to stop there just like we did in our drawing. 4-inch dado. Okay, so I got one side. I'm going to flip this guy over. Again, my beam is on the end of my workpiece, and I scribe on my blade. The metal part is what I'm going to draw on. So I'm going to find my mark, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, and stop. And then I know exactly where the end is. 4 inches where those two marks meet. Right there. Okay, so I got my dado. Almost done. The only thing I need is the depth. Who remembers the depth of our dado? How far down we have to dig into this sucker? Does anybody remember that? Type it in the chat if you remember. There will be a prize waiting for you next September when you come back. Just kidding. Hopefully by next week. Anybody remember? Thinking. She's thinking. Wait. I'm waiting. I'm also waiting. 3/4 inch deep. This is only 3/4 inch thick. If I keep digging down 3/4, I'm not going to have any wood left. How deep is it? Does anybody remember? Yes, Francine nailed it. 1/16 inch deep. Give her a hand, folks. Woo! Okay, so I'm going to find my mark. And I'm going to measure down 1/16 of an inch. And make a little mark. And now this is where a combination square would be really handy. I should have brought one home. But I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. Okay, so now, tricky enough, because this piece isn't super square, it's lumber softwood, so it's a little cupped. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna meet up my marks. You guys can't see anything. I'm gonna meet up my marks on the top, and we're going to scribe across those 2 marks. Beautiful. Not that beautiful, but gives me a starting point. Okay, so the waist mark, I'm cutting inside those. I'm cutting in here, so I'm going to get rid of all that material. Now, how are we going to get rid of that material? Oh, it's only 3 o'clock. We got some time left. Let's do it. Now, yeah, so depth, we start at 1/16. Most students go too deep, and then to level it off nice, we have to go to 1/8. That's totally okay, because this guy fits in here, whether it's 1/16 or 1/8. The main thing is that it slides in nice. It doesn't really matter how deep it is. So if you go too deep, all good. Okay, so let's start showing you how to do that. Now this is fun because we get to use a chisel. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some initial marks with our chisel, and then we're going to start to cut. So a chisel. What the heck does a chisel look like? So we got a few examples of a chisel here. These chisels are all different widths, basically the same angle, but we got a 3/4, we got a 1/2, and we got a 1/4 chisel. Okay, so we can use any of those. A chisel with a metal end on it, that's the one you can hit with a hammer. So if you want to do a little chiseling that way, especially on hardwood, you can. Yeah, yay, chisels. That's how students really hurt themselves. But we're just going to use these chisels that you push. Basic standard chisel that we don't want to hit with a hammer. If we keep hitting these ends with a hammer, we're going to mushroom the plastic. It's going to get really sharp on the edges, and then we have to smooth it off. It's a pain in the butt. So we're going to start with the 3/4 inch chisel, the big one, because what we first want to do here is make our marks for where we want to go to. So I'm going to take the flat side of the chisel. You notice there's an angle side of the chisel and there's a flat side of the chisel. And we're going to put that against my line, my pencil mark. And I'm going to push down. And I'm going to push down about a 1/16 or so that when I start chiseling, this doesn't bust out into my piece. What I'm doing is it's like bumper lanes in bowling. You're creating this sharp scribed edge. Oh, I just screwed up. Jeez, Mr. Lawrence. That's okay. That's what sandpaper's for. This nice scribed edge is going to guide me when I'm chiseling. Okay. And I'm going to go all the way around my dado here. Any questions? No questions. Good. So 3/4 inches wide. Now I'm going to turn my chisel around so that my flat side is against my pencil. And I'm going to keep on pushing down. And I'm just going to keep making those marks. It's just guides. So when I start chiseling, I don't get wild and crazy left and right. It creates some ditches for me. It's like ditches in the road, so you don't end up in the cabbage. Okay? Good. Okay. Ow! That's a sliver. Okay. That's where I went too wide. Okay, so the whole thing's been scribed. So now I can start to chisel. Now if I use my 3/4, I got to be really careful, because if I go a little to the left, little to the right, this ends up being bigger than 3/4, and then my next workpiece, my angled piece, won't fit in there really nice, and I want it to fit in there really nice. This one's actually been planed, so it's a little bit skinny. We might have to grab another piece. Okay, so now we can start to chisel using my little ditches as guides. So what you want to do is to keep 2 hands on the chisel, 2 hands behind the cutting edge. Lots of students do this. Guess what happens? The chisel slips, they're pushing very hard, maybe the chisel isn't as sharp as it should be, and the chisel goes into their thumb. Yeah, right here, this big meaty part. and then they need stitches, and it's not fun. Yeah, exactly. Hurt yourself. So 2 hands on the tool. Now the worst case, it slips and you're going to bonk your hand against your workpiece or the vise, and that hurts, but it's not the same as putting the chisel into your hand. So what I'll actually do is I'll rest my hand on my vise, and I'll start to pare this away. So what I'm doing is I'm going to make a really small cut to start, not very big, and I'm going to follow my borders, nice and easy, nice and straight, so that I don't make this too wide. Now, a lot of students end up doing this instead of this, and then it dives in and they got big holes. We don't want that. So if you're struggling with cutting too deep with a chisel, what you can do is turn the chisel upside down, and you can chisel this way, and then it keeps you from cutting too deep. I really should have sharpened this chisel before I started, but we're going to make do. I think we can handle it. We're big. We're big kids. Okay. Now, if I get so deep that I'm past my little ditches, I need to rescribe because I don't want to go wider than I should. Okay, it's kind of like using carving tools. You want to make sure when you get to the end, you don't bust out the end. So when you get close to the end, sort of come to the end and then throw your chisel in the end and pop it down, just to make sure that that last little piece doesn't go wild on you. And you're just going to keep taking little bites and chiseling down. Now, some students find it a little easier to use a narrower chisel for this job. That's okay too. You can just go a little left and right. Gives you a little bit more leeway. But once you get your cut started, it's not that difficult to do. Okay, so I'm almost already at my 16th mark. Now, grain is dynamic. Trees don't grow like metal. They don't follow a typical molecular structure. They're trees. They have a history. They have a story. They've seen wind. They've seen fire. They've seen droughts. And so as you're cutting, you're going to get some weird things happen. It's going to chip out funny. You're going to be like, why is it doing this? Well, it's because you're cutting into 150 years of growth sometimes, and the tree's seen some stuff. It's sort of like therapy, you know? You start digging back the layers, peeling back the layers. You never know what you're gonna find. Okay, so you gotta be ready for that. Okay, so I've got a dado started here. This one's not bad. It's about a 30-second. We can go a little deeper. We got time. So let's make another bite here. And what I'm trying to do is keep this as straight as possible. Now I've kind of run out of ditches, so I'm going to re-score these edges to make sure I don't go too wide. If I go too wide, then my piece won't fit in there nice and snug. And it kind of defeats the purpose of the dado, this groove, if it's not the right size, because it's not going to add much strength if my glue has to fill a whole bunch of huge cracks. We want our piece to fit in without any glue and screws, and then the glue and screws is just extra. It's really just security, backup. Glue and screws just becomes backup for my workpiece. Rather than relying on the glue and screws, we're relying on our joinery. And grain's a little trickier. Okay, so we're going to make another cut here. Okay. Now I'm starting to see some things here. This wood's acting a little funny, which is not surprising. Things don't grow uniformly. We got spring wood in there. We got summer wood in there. We got, hard. We got some wood near the middle of the heartwood of the tree, as you guys learned in your wood types worksheet. And I'm just kind of working it like that. If you get a really nice sharp chisel, which this is not, you can get some nice curls going, but here we are. Okay. Okay. So what we got is a dado, okay? So we got a groove here, something for our next little piece to work into. Imagine being patient. Oh, you guys are hilarious. Okay, so we got a nice straight cut here. It's about a 1/16 of an inch deep. You know, it's not going to add too much with tiny little walls like that. But what it's going to do is it's going to give a place for my worked piece to fit into. Now, if you end up with a really rough surface, you can get a little file in there. You can even turn a bastard file on its edge, and you can get in there and file that. The issue with that is as soon as you start to smooth something that's going to be glued, you close up the pores. Oops, typed by accident. And the glue doesn't get in as well. So avoid filing, avoid sanding, especially sanding where you're going to glue. So if I want to glue this, definitely don't want to be doing too much finishing work. Chiseling is fine. So the light is kind of shining on it funny, but that's our dado. Okay, so this piece has been planed. I realized that after I grabbed it, unfortunately. So it's going to be kind of wobbly in here. It's not going to fit super nice. If I can find something here that's not been planed, I can do a test fit. That's much better. So there's no wiggle in that whatsoever. We want our piece to sit in there really nice, no gaps, so that it doesn't have any movement. When I glue and screw it, it's going to be super tight. So that's where that thing's going to go, is right in there. So this is an unplaned piece. That's what we want. So this is the same, or hardwood. So the piece that we've already made, this is our next piece we're going to make, is going to fit in there really nice with glue and screws. Watch out for your car. Yeah. Smash! Break the window throwing something around. Yeah, it's probably pretty close, eh? Anyways. Thanks for the tip. We got about 10 minutes left. We can lay out our screw holes. We can start drawing out where those are going to go. And if we got time to drill them, great. If not, we'll do it tomorrow. We'll also cut this tomorrow, and then we're going to glue and screw it. Least we need to do finishing paper too. So, walk to school. My wife drives it. It's too nice for me. I have an old truck from 2002 that I drive. My wife gets the 2019, so I get the old truck. So if I smash it, I'll just have to sleep on the couch for a while. That's okay. Of course you do. Yeah. What does that mean? Okay. So this is what we're after. This is our finished product. 4 inches long, 3/4 inch wide, and 1/16 deep for our 4x4 little curved angled gusset piece to fit in there real nice. Okay. So let's draw these out. You give off a truck guy vibe. Okay. I don't know what that means. Redneck? Okay, if you remember if you do recall where our screws go from our model piece here, 3/4 in from each side. So 3/4 down, 3/4 in, 3/4 down, 3/4 in. Same for these two. So that's what we're going to do here. So once again, tri-square comes in really handy. I'm going to make a little mark at 3/4 this way. And then I'm going to come in from this side, and I'm going to make a little mark at 3/4 inch this way. And where those two marks meet is where I'm going to drill. Okay, so that's all I need, is a little corner there where those are going to meet. Done. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down 3/4 on this side, and I'm going to come in 3/4 from this side. Now, this is where students get a little confused sometimes. they don't meet. Is where I've made my 2 marks, but they're not meeting. So what I need to do is I need to move this mark that away. So I'm going to measure down again, 3/4, so same measurement, but this time I'm going to find my second mark and I'm going to make sure to touch it. So the mark's in the same place, but now it's touching. Well, it's not exactly in the same place. Didn't do a very good job there. Okay, so I'm going to turn around. I'm going to do the same from the other side. So I'm going to come down 3/4 of an inch, make a mark. I'm going to go in 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to make a mark. Oops. Okay, good. So that's where that one's going to go. And then on the other side, should be the same line as the other side, which is great. I can just use this mark as my horizontal line and make a mark at 3/4 of an inch right there. Okay, so now I have my screw holes top, screw holes bottom. Now we've got, according to this, we've got countersink holes on the top where my dado is, and then countersink holes on the bottom, opposite. So these tapered holes need to be drilled on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to measure those holes on the bottom. Okay, let's do that. So once again, we need to find center. So 1.5 plus 3/16. 1, 2, 3/16. And I'm just going to go off of that line to measure these marks. So these 2 marks are 1 3/4 to the center of this mark. And then past that, another 1.5 inches. So I've got, I'm going to find that line. I'm going to go down 1 3/4, and I'm going to make an L shape again for the center of my hole. And then I'm going to go another 1.5 inches past that mark, or I can measure 1 3/4 from this side to my second hole. Either or is fine. You guys will know this from your drawing. You ladies will know this from your drawing. So 1.5 inches to my second mark. Okay, so where those points meet, that's where I'm going to drill. So I'm drilling from this side for the bottom of my piece. You can see the taper, and I'm drilling from this side for these 4 holes for that one. Okay, so we got a little bit of time. What purpose do the holes serve? Good. A motorcycle vibe. A motorcycle, no. I used to ride a dirt bike, but it wasn't that fun. I didn't have as much fun as I do with mountain biking. It's kind of a lonely sport. Dirt bikes are like you go off on your own and you have fun, but then you don't really on a mountain bike you can talk to people, you can converse, and you can stop and have fun. Dirt bikes are noisy and they're not really for kids, so I got a mountain bike now. This is my baby over here. So that's what I like to ride around on now. Okay, so what purpose do the holes serve? Good question. These are countersink holes for my screws. So on this workpiece, I'm going to put screws through these 4 holes into my armrest, and I'm going to put screws through these 2 holes into this piece, my angled, my gusset piece. Why do they have to be tapered? For the screw head. So you'll notice on the bottom, these 2 screws are going in. What you want is a nice taper here for the screw head to fit into nice and flush. This one's nice and flush. This one's a little proud. We call it proud if that's a little high. So what you want to do is you want to get your countersink deep enough that your screw head fits in there really nice. What scared you? Oh my, that scared me. Are you okay? All right. So that, and on the top, likewise, her profile. Oh, Daniela, what are you doing? Trying to freak everybody out here? So these ones are done. These ones are not quite deep enough. This one maybe got sanded off a little bit. This countersink isn't quite deep enough. So the tool we use for that is a countersink bit. So we're going to go over to our over to our tools here. And then I got a countersink bit hanging out in this can. All right. Countersink bit. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to make, it's going to drill a hole for the screw to go through, and then it's going to make this little taper here for the screw head. So I'll show you what that looks like. So the screw looks like this, and so does the drill bit. So I drill through the first part here because the screw doesn't need to hold on this piece. It needs to hold on whatever's on the other side of this piece. So I make a big hole for the screw to go right through, and then it's going to screw into the next piece. It doesn't need to screw into this. It just needs to go through this into the next piece. That's what a countersink is for. A countersink is so that we drill a big hole for the screw to go through into the next piece. We don't really need it to hold in this piece. We need it to hold in the next piece. So that's when we use a countersink. If we do a pilot hole, it's a smaller bit, and it's just a starting hole, a starting hole for this, okay? So we'll explain that a little bit more as we go. It'll make more sense when we put these two pieces together. We're going to drill a countersinking hole and a pilot hole. So two different holes. We're going to put, we've got two countersink holes in this piece, and then we've got two pilot holes that are going to go into this piece for the screw to actually screw into. So the screw is going to go through this piece and screw into this piece. So this one gets a countersink, this one gets two pilot holes. Now, why do we do pilot holes and countersinks? Because this is like a wedge. If you wedge wood apart, it's going to split. If you split the wood, you crack the wood, it's garbage. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to countersink it or pilot hole it so it doesn't crack and split. Okay, so 323, let's do that tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to do some drilling. We're going to do some cutting of our angled piece, and maybe gluing and screwing if we get to it. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and we'll see you tomorrow. Any questions? Good?
Yeah.
All right. I yacked enough for 100 years. TikTok? No, TED Talk, not TikTok. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Okay, bye. We'll see you tomorrow. You guys are a blast. Okay. Peace.
You too, sir.
See ya.
Bye.